edition of Let's Be Blunt with Montel. I'm Montel Williams, and what we do here at Let's Be Blunt is we talk about everything and anything cannabis to see if we can make sure we get you some information to help you navigate the landscape out there as you try to make good choices for your own health and wellness. So thank you so much for joining us today. And today, as we have looked at, the last 3 years when it comes to cannabis around the world and especially in the United States, and we've noticed that, now people are finally starting to understand the benefits of medicinal marijuana and the benefits of this marijuana period. Sometimes I think, and most of the time, we have forgotten the past and what has transpired even in the recent past when it comes to marijuana. And today I'm really happy to have a guest on that might be able to put a little bit more of this in perspective. He won the Olympic gold medal for snowboarding in 1998, but was stripped of his medal, eventually being returned to him, but stripped of his medal because they found low levels of THC in his bloodstream. He's a proponent of cannabis for sports performance enhancement. He recently started a brand new program called Legacy by Ross, a cannabis retail company. I'm talking about the one and only Mr. Ross Rebagliati, the 1998 first Olympic gold medal snowboarder from Canada. Ross, thank you so much for joining us today.
Montel, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, sir, and I'm glad you're back. But, it's interesting, people tune in to our podcast from all over the world, and I think a lot of people forgot, though I remember you, and I remember when this happened, thinking that's really kind of crazy and stupid, but a lot of people don't remember what happened to you. Let's talk a little bit about your experience back in Japan in 1998 when you actually won the gold medal. And was that the first year that snowboarding was recognized as a sport in the Olympics?
It was, yeah. It was a big build-up, and snowboarding was, on the forefront of sports and what the young people were into at the time and still are. It was...
And you crushed it. Destroying the competition. And after your event, now, did they take a blood test of you after the event?
So it was a urine test right then in the finish line. Basically, they had a medical tent set up. And so we gave our urine tests right there in the finish line. We had a little mock-up award ceremony there ahead of time. And then we did the pee test. And that's where I gave my sample.
And let's talk about it. You gave your sample, and the sample came back not identifying what the substance was, correct?
That's right. They didn't let me know. At least they didn't let me know what it was. They may have known. Somebody might have known exactly, but we weren't sure. I had a feeling that I knew what it was because I don't take steroids and I don't take, I don't cheat or anything like that. I'm an honest guy. I just want to be a law-abiding citizen like everybody else. And but I was exposed to cannabis leading up to Nagano on a daily, and it just never occurred to me that even though I wasn't using it, that could happen. And of course, obviously, we know, people died from cancer from being in the workplace where people were smoking cigarettes back in the 70s and 80s. So it's not a stretch, but yep.
You actually tested positive from secondhand smoke of cannabis. So you weren't using it at the time. And when that test came out positive, they tried to say that you were using a banned substance, but later found out that marijuana wasn't even on the Olympics banned substance list, correct?
That's right. The Holy Grail. And it was quite the surprise that, because we actually thought it was. Going into the Olympics, we thought it was because on the World Cup tour, it is on the list, but the IOC list was slightly different and didn't include cannabis. And just to be clear, Montel, I wasn't using cannabis at the time, but I had stopped using it, to meet the Olympic criteria. So I just want to clarify, I was a cannabis user leading up to the games, since, probably a good 6-7 years before that. And then to meet Olympic criteria, I, obviously stopped using it. And then, it just, the secondhand smoke got me.
And, let's talk about how scary this experience was, because did not the Japanese government try to charge you with bringing in a illegal substance into the country, even though it was in your bloodstream?
Exactly. I ended up in jail in a police station in Nagano on the second day.
This is all on the same day. The second day. So what?
Yeah.
You go to the tent, you give your sample, they say, "Oh, we found something," and then they arrest you the next day?
No. So what happened was that they had to take that sample to the lab, and so we went down to Nagano that night. From Shigakogen, which was the mountain. So we went down to Nagano. We did the official award ceremonies where I was presented my gold medal. And we partied all night in the hotel up at the ski resort. And we
partied without cannabis, you partied.
Exactly. We were doing, I guess there was a bottle of whiskey going around, and I don't know what was going on, but we had a good time. There was karaoke, and it wasn't out of control or anything like that. The other athletes were there that still had to compete. This was the very first day of the Olympics as well. So that was all great. And in the morning, people were congregating in my room because none of us had ever even seen an Olympic medal before. And all of a sudden, so the coaches came in the room, and this was after breakfast, and told everybody to get out except for me. And that's when the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and they told me I better sit down and that I tested positive for a controlled substance. And like you said, they didn't know what it was, but they told me to gather up all my supplements. And, I was taking all the regular stuff like creatine and whatever we're allowed to take. I'm not the biggest guy, but I was competing against guys that were like 6'5", right? 240. And so I was like 195% body fat trying to, eke up my weight class. But I told them right then, I was like, it's cannabis. Like, there's only one thing that I'm pretty sure it could be, and that's what it was, as it turned out. But it took a couple of days, though, because, from then, when the coaches were in my room, they sent me on a bus down to Nagano, 2 hours by myself on a little shuttle van. I'm just like, the world's caving in on me. And we get there, from the ski resort, there was just nobody there. I was just left by myself. I got there. There was literally like 1,000 reporters waiting for the shuttle van and where I was supposed to meet. And if you look on YouTube, you can see like how crazy it was. I mean, there was paparazzi, and I was getting pushed around, and that sort of thing. So that day went by. It was pretty sleepless night. And then the next day we had a couple of appeals in front of the IOC, which I lost. And so we were feeling pretty down. I was surrounded by my Canadian Olympic team, group of people that were assigned to this situation. And amongst them was Carol Ann Letheran, who really helped me out and believed my story, which was integral in me being able to present my case, was that our guys believed me. And not everybody did, right? It was a likely story, sure, secondhand smoke, yeah, right. And but there was tests done to show that those results could only have come up through secondhand smoke, just because the numbers were so low. It's like I was on the Tonight Show like a few days later on with Jay Leno, and it was like a billionth of a gram, I think was the number that they came up with. But anyways, that was pretty funny. They were trying to figure out how much that would cost. But anyway,
a billionth of a gram. Gotcha.
So I mean, it was weed's funny, right? Like, this wasn't a funny situation, but I get that, and I wasn't offended by any of the, I think David Letterman and even SNL did some funny stuff, and it was all great. Kind of broke the ice a little bit, but at the time, like, I was going through a serious life crisis, and after the second appeal was lost, that's when the police grabbed me and took me up to the police station and pretty much just interrogated me for the whole long day.
So this was like what, day three that this happened?
So the race, and then the next day was going down to Nagano, and then it was probably the second day after the race, roughly, I'm gonna say. And
they were going to charge you with what? bringing illegal substance into Japan because it was in your blood.
Right. It was the charge was importing a controlled substance, and it was in my blood and my urine, and so it was a bit of a stretch, right? But Asia's different, and Japan, there's a different culture there, and all of that, and so I was really cognizant of that, and I'd been in Japan over 10 times prior to going over there. The World Cup tours stopped there on a regular every year, so I kind of understood like there was this cultural difference, and I tried to just relax, stay calm and kind of let the authorities. I mean, we've all watched the Olympics. Like, who ends up in jail? I mean, nobody ends up in jail, even after steroids, right? So I was a little bit confused, and so was everybody else. Like, this was something no one had thought through as far as our organizing committee. And when I was in there, that's when they made the decision, because the Court of Arbitration got involved after the second appeal was lost. So 5 lawyers basically went through the whole rules and saw on the first page that it wasn't on the list of banned substances. And so then it was just a clear-cut case of, no rules were broken. They got the call at the police station that I was reinstated. And by the way, it was the first time a medal had ever been taken away and given back again in the history of the Olympics. So it was pretty monumental to lose the medal. It's guaranteed almost that you're not getting it back because no one ever had before. And so there was some cheers, and I was so shell shocked at the time, though. I was happy to get it back, but at this point I'd had so much anxiety. I pretty much had a crisis over this couple of days, and I was never diagnosed with PTSD or anything, but it took me a good 10 years after to start paying my taxes and getting my mail. And I did a lot of PR stuff. I did a lot of celebrity style stuff, in Canada. Like I said, I was on, the Tonight Show, and I got worldwide attention, and it kind of lasted longer than the average guy might get their 10 seconds of fame, just because cannabis was so relevant. And because I was reinstated, they talked about it again in the 2002 Olympics, and they did the profile on me, and I started realizing, okay, because I was the first guy, I'm going to be profiled in every Olympics, forever. And because this happened with cannabis, I call it the perfect drug test. The conversation kept going and going every 4 years. And then Summer Olympics started talking about it. Like in Rio, for example, they weren't testing for cannabis. And so I got all the interviews from around that. And
saying that this, what a lot of people don't understand is that even though you were reinstated, no charges were filed, this impacted your life in an absolutely insane way. You lost all your sponsorship. Is that not right?
Yeah. I lost my sponsorships, and then Canadian company Roots, stepped up and we did it was a micro endorsement deal, I'll call it, but at the time it was good support, just for me psychologically that, something was happening, and I was hopefully going to, be able to turn it around. And, but you're right, for the most part, like I ended up on the no-fly list after, 9/11 yesterday, right? So, our hearts go out to all the victims and survivors and everyone impacted by that. There was a blanket thrown over the whole, this one list, and I got on it. And so just as far as, being able to be part of the X Games at the time, we're just a burgeoning brand new event, and border cross, and the attention was on me for, substance abuse, Schedule 1 substance, no use to society whatsoever. It's like the devil's drug. And here I am. I'm like, no, guys, like actually it's part of a sustainable, healthy lifestyle. I go to bed early. I wake up early. I sleep great. I eat great. I work out on a regular. I just did, I don't know what 39 kilometers in 1 hour is, but it's pretty hard workout. I just did that. I'm 48 years old, and this has been my life. So being able to like know that this is going to turn around, but I don't know when, and then
Mm-hmm.
to live through that whole, like I worked construction. I wasn't able to, the corporate community was, kind of turned their back. A lot of my pre-spawn, even the, some people within the sport of snowboarding and even the sport itself was getting bigger and more corporate. And they're like, no, actually, even though we brought you up this way, we're going to, sort of turn our backs a little bit now. And so it was tough. And, I went through a whole rediscovery, like who I am as a person, but really, what that led to was the belief in the cannabis in the first place that had got me to the Olympics and through hard times to get there. This was before the internet. This was before anything. So when I'm in Europe traveling, I'm by myself. Nobody knows where I am. No one knows when I'm coming home. A lot of times there weren't phones in the hotel rooms back in the 90s. And, you're just on a mission. And so cannabis really got me through a lot of periods of, solemn periods where I've done my training. I'm back in the hotel or the house that we rented in Austria, and I'm on a mission. And so that's, after the Olympics, I kind of had to realize that I'm not going to turn my back on cannabis. It helped me then, and it's going to help me now. And so here we are 21 years later. And, the U.S. has gone through a transformation, with the illegality or legality of cannabis, and it's moving towards the federal model. And Canada has embraced the federal model within the last 12 months, amazingly, last October.
Now,
So,
are you still on list? Are you still on list right now? Will they stop you from coming into the United States now, even though you were not convicted of any crime?
correct. I have what's called an advanced parole, and a waiver that I need from my immigration lawyer, who I go there, when I go through customs, I have to show them the paperwork. I have to literally tell them why I have it. It's part of the deal. Like if I lie about why I have it, then automatically it gets revoked. So I have to tell them. And then it's just a hassle. And, like my mom.
But wait a minute, I'm sorry. You have to tell them what? That you were falsely accused of using a banned substance because you didn't really use it. And this craziness took place. And so this is now justifying why I'm a good person.
Basically, yeah. Basically. And try telling those guys that, right? Like they just don't want to buy it. Like they'll look at the social media, and ever since I haven't really been like a crazy social media person, but I did start my Instagram account a few years ago, and everything that I've ever done in the media for 20 years has all been about getting behind cannabis and promoting a healthy lifestyle around it. So it's kind of a stretch for me to my lawyer's like, just say you don't use it anymore, and you don't hang out with those people. And that's what they literally want you to say, that because they don't even want to process you and go through the paperwork, but there's a mandate that they have to abide by. So it's been a bit of a pain in the butt, just in that I spent so much time in the States training in Oregon and Colorado and even in Northern California and stuff. And my mom lives in Palm Springs, California. So it's just, I've got 3 kids that I would love to, bring down to grandma's place and, the whole thing. So like, I kind of felt like America was my second home. And it was, being a world person traveling around on the World Cup tour, sure, I'm from Vancouver. I lived in Whistler for a long time, and I'm Canadian, but really like the world was my playground. And since I spent so much time of it in my backyard, which was the U.S., I really felt that connection. So it was just tough to swallow. It was one of the worst things about it that, came of it, was not being able to travel through into the States freely. And, but besides that, even now I still have I just had to renew it, actually.
Are you kidding me? 20 years later, from a non-bust, you still have to justify who you are.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. But I think it's going to come to an end when you guys see federal legalization, and I really believe it's just around the corner.
From your from your mouth to God's ears. And a lot of people here in the United States are hoping that that same thing would happen. But I think that political winds change here at the drop of a dime. So I don't know whether or not I could agree with you 100% how quickly the Fed's going to make a change in their attitudes about cannabis. But let's move on for a second. So you went through this whole thing 20 years ago, and you told me that you said earlier that it took you 10 years to get beyond this, correct?
Yeah, at least 10 years. Yeah, I would say I was in a bit of a fog, and there was a really thick stigma and stereotype at the time. So from '98 to '08, let's just say. This was in the throes of prohibition, right? Like California had just done the medical thing. I think it was either like '94 or something like that. And it was like, oh yeah, right. Like even Sanjay Gupta wasn't behind cannabis at the time.
Correct.
And then he came out with his beautiful Charlotte's Web story years later. And so if you can imagine like what it would be like for an athlete, everyone's calling me out. Yeah, right. It wasn't secondhand smoke. Even the president of the IOC called me a liar. So here I am, just a young guy. I was 26 at the time. On the no-fly list, lose sponsors. Like I was pretty devastated by the whole thing. And at the same time, I was held up by the cannabis community and the people, basically, through media and opportunities to go on talk shows. At the time, were there and plentiful. There wasn't a paycheck for it, but when Michael Phelps had his little foray with the bong at university, I was the guy that went on NBC to say why an athlete would choose cannabis and against the anti-cannabis guy. So I was putting my neck out in favor of all the reasons why cannabis is a good thing, but at the same time I was living a pretty I didn't have any money. I had no income. I could barely make ends meet. And at one point I was literally buying like the small pack of peanuts and for the day.
Sure.
and I'm not even kidding. I go to the little store in Creekside there in Whistler and go in there and buy the little thing, and no one knew it. But now I'm on keto, so I actually was doing something that was good for me. But anyway,
and didn't even realize it, right? Right.
No, right. Whatever. No, it was a different. And I walked on job sites with my tool belt, my hammer, and I got just simple jobs at first, and then I worked up to being part of a crew building houses in Whistler and operating machinery, heavy machinery, excavators and skid steers, and just doing driveways and fucking tying steel. So I know what it felt like. I had an ego just like all guys and all athletes that win gold medals might have, And
meanwhile, that's what I was going to say. Meanwhile, you're going through all this, but you've got a gold medal that you've got stashed away in a drawer somewhere.
Right. I got the drawer, with all the shit in it that you don't know where to put. And in there is a little leather pouch with the gold medal that I hadn't even looked at for like a decade. And so it was kind of a contrast between barely, not being able to make ends meet, not even being able to, buy food, to working on job sites, and all the while doing like really high profile media events. And, so there was a huge contrast. I was living a double life, and I was really trying to portray, that I've risen above it, or that it didn't bother me in the first place. But really, you can just look at my tax records. I didn't even do my taxes for friggin' 10 years. I didn't even think about getting my mail, never even considered that. That's not happening. Just ordering food to my house, because I didn't want to go shopping and be in the public limelight, because it's fine and dandy, and I appreciated the support that I always got. I literally, like, maybe a couple of guys sent me death threats in the mail, but basically, this was, a very positive experience, and it was tough to take.
What kept you going, Ross? What kept you going, man? I mean, anybody else would have just said, the heck with this, I'm done. Forget it. You know what I mean? What kept you going? What kept you looking ahead, thinking that this is going to turn into something good one day?
The cannabis. It kept me out of depression. It kept a level head on my shoulders. As you know, it can be very introspective, and it made me consider a lot of things that were going on in my life and in the world, and my basic belief in the plant itself, and that this is something that's going to take off. I mean, this prohibition is not there for real. It's not there for any good reason. Someone's going to realize this, and I'm going to try to like bring this to light, and so that was kind of the motivation that I had, to rise out of the ashes of depression and poverty and having a smashed ego and the whole from hero to zero on NBC on New Year's Eve one year. I was watching that one. That felt awesome. And so there's all these things that are trying to beat you down, and just like the average guy, or woman, like in life, and everybody has it, and whatever, if it's, it doesn't look the same, and, it doesn't feel the same, but, there's people have these struggles in life, and I wasn't going to, just be in, I deserve this or that or anything, like, I made my bed and I'm going to sleep in it. And, I was somehow chosen to, carry the torch for cannabis. And, like I said, I call it the perfect drug test. They gave me the opportunity, and it gave me a platform, where I could get out there and say, look, cannabis is performance enhancing, everybody. It's family friendly. I'm going to tell my kids to use it and to try to stay away from alcohol and the whole 9 yards. And these were things back then people didn't want to hear. And I had the opportunity to voice that.
Well, now that, in Canada and the changes to the Canadian marijuana system has been over a period of time also, though now federally it has been made legal. Even before that, they went through about a year and a half to 2 year period of time where, different, I guess, administrations or different municipalities had different rulings on cannabis. Did your world start to change when that started to change?
It did. Yeah. And, we saw a gray market emerge in Canada, and in particular in British Columbia, in Vancouver, where we had illegal dispensaries that were, in a sense, selling black market cannabis on the retail market. And that was allowed to exist for over a decade, and with basically no instances of violence or, like you might see a bar fight at a bar or something like that. There was nothing like that to speak of. And, there was a tax issue, obviously, but, the city of Vancouver, even created licenses for these stores during Prohibition and accepted them as actually a human rights issue. So,
and did any of those people in the business then reach out to you to offer you opportunities then, or no?
Yeah, there were opportunities then to get involved, and in the very early stages of that movement, I was still kind of afraid of being arrested or really going down that road. Even though I was talking about it openly in the media, I wasn't actually physically breaking the law. And I think it was basically when I tried to take my baby daughter about 7 years ago down to see my mom in California. I'm like, well, I haven't tried to go across the border in a while, and whatever 2012 or whatever the year was, and I'll try to do it. So I packed up the whole family, the dog, and we got turned around at the border, and my wife was crying, and it was just like, it kind of brought it all back to life again. And I just was so mad that I just said, you know what, this is it. Like, I've lost what I would normally be trying to protect already. What do I have to lose now by starting a cannabis company? And then so I started my brand, Ross's Gold. That was the Prohibition brand that I started 7 years ago. And we ended up with a gray market dispensary in Kelowna. where we built a beautiful Ross Gold store. People thought it was a jewelry store. They came in looking for the gold, and we had like 30 kinds of cannabis. We had all the extracts and we all the edibles and everything. We had big screen TVs playing like sports and all my stuff, the Olympics, and talking about Canada. It was great. It was like a dream come true, right? And then, we shut it down because legalization became a thing, and so we shut it down, and I started Legacy, and Legacy was the brand that I wanted to kind of start with in the new legal era, and create a brand that was for athletes by athletes. CBD is going to be a major focus, with topical creams and patches and things that athletes and people who just want to be the best they can be can use on a daily. Of course, we're going to have stores and all of the flour and all the fun rec stuff and edibles and everything as well, oils and extracts. But really, the Legacy brand now is really kind of the sophisticated sports brand geared towards people living a healthy lifestyle, and Ross Gold is the recreational brand and everything that people celebrate cannabis for, and kind of on that level. So we've got these two really great and amazing brands that we're building right now,
and both are legal right now. Both are legal right now in Canada.
Correct. Yeah. So we came into that legal era a year ago, in last October, where recreational cannabis became, just an age limit of 19. So, and you know what? The numbers are going to speak for themselves. The safety of this plant really is second to none. And I think once the naysayers kind of go looking for the numbers and then they can't find them, they're going to be shaking their heads like, well, how come we were told this was such a dangerous thing? And I got ID'd just the other day to buy alcohol. I wouldn't even say, it was probably back in March, because I haven't had anything to drink for about 6 months, just to try to drop weight, because I'm riding my road bike and I'm doing the Ironman next summer and everything. So I just couldn't even believe it, because I just turned 48. I'm like, really? So that's saying something. I'd like to think that genetically the cannabis is keeping me younger.
And now again, philosophically, your brand that you have, your Legacy brand, and you said, let's talk a little bit more about the fact that this is a brand that is more sports oriented, because you have some interesting beliefs in cannabis's ability to enhance sports and fitness. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So cannabis literally is performance enhancing, and that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. In the early days when I was saying that, I was coming at it from a different perspective of performance enhancement, in that it gave me the motivation to do the mundane, to work out again, for the millionth time. I'm going to do this crazy workout or bike ride or what have you. And then I'm going to use cannabis again to recover from that bike ride instead of alcohol, so that I'm not putting in extra calories and carbs into my body, and that my cells and everything, like through CBD and that sort of thing, can regenerate, and I can eat and sleep well, because when you sleep, that's when your body actually builds itself back up again, and you get that nice REM going with cannabis, sleeping like a 5-year-old. I'm not even kidding. But now, so that was all just sort of like a psychological boost that, gave you motivation. But nowadays with science, is allowed to be done on cannabis, they're finding that with your endocannabinoid system that we all have, it's our biggest sensory system in our bodies. When those little receptors, the endocannabinoid receptors, are full, and the cannabinoid goes into them and fills that receptor sends a signal to all of your cells in your body to perform more things than they're already doing. So basically, in a cannabinoid deficient system, your cells are performing less function than when your cannabinoid system is not deficient. So as when it's full, your cells in your body literally doing more stuff for you, and it leads to, it fights depression, it fights concussion, it fights the dead brain cells and Alzheimer's, it fights MS, as you know. There's all kinds of, I mean, literally the list is longer than the banned list of substances for the IOC. I mean, this is like you can literally trace the beginning of big pharma to the beginning of prohibition. Literally, when they stopped using cannabis for medicine, that's when people started getting sick. And so now when you hear that, oh, my cells can do more things when my cannabinoid system is full, I mean, that's performance enhancing at a molecular level. I mean, you can't, that's an irrefutable scientific evidence.
Yeah, we do know that there's research that's been out there and information that has been peer reviewed and written about that talks about the fact that the endocannabinoid system is responsible for what we call cellular homeostasis, making the cells operate at their optimum efficiency. Ross, let me ask you a question, brother. I mean, when you look back at it now, this has been literally 21 years that you took a journey that 15 years of it wasn't necessarily the best journey that you could have taken. Would you do this all over again?
It would be an honor. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And, it's emotional. Like, I got the hairs on the back of my neck standing up right now. But, it's been a big, huge honor for me to be this guy, to be the guy that, had this opportunity to speak out and on the behalf of millions of people around the world that have, lost, their families have been crushed by, simple possession, ending up in a penitentiary, or, racial profiling has been a thing over, and prohibition has been used that way. There's been all kinds of like terrible injustices that have been done to our society and to our people. And, for me, like, who am I? I'm nobody. I get to be this guy. For me, that's, I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
Well, if people wanted to read a little bit more about your story, what website can they go up on? Go ahead, give me a website.
Yeah, well, you can go on to legacybyross.com. And you can check that out. I've got rossrebagliati.com. Has a lot of my history. My ex turned it into a porn site a few years ago, but we got it back. Okay. And so that's funny. But anyways, you know what? I've lived a pretty crazy life, but at the same time, I think a lot of people can relate to, the ups and downs. And, there's a lot of stuff on YouTube about me. We're coming out with all kinds of cool stuff from Legacy, like our grow equipment and our grow tents that are coming out. Everyone in Canada is now allowed to do, or every household can do 4 plants. So we've got the nutrients, we've got the organic soil. So we're having a ton of fun. I like to consider myself a pretty good grower. I can speak to the benefits of cannabis. I'm an athlete. So we're pretty vertical over on this side of things. Like, we get the plant. We love the plant. We're owners of a cannabis company who use the plant on a daily. And not a lot of cannabis companies can say that.
Absolutely. Well,
believe it or not.
I'm telling you, I can't wait for the movie myself. Honestly, my friend, I think that movie should be done, and hopefully it'll get done soon. And if you need any help with that, make sure you reach out and let me know, and I'll see what I can do to help you out.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I gotta say, I can't, this whole, my whole venture right now with Let's Be Blunt was to be able to talk about stories like yours, my friend. And thank you so much for being so blunt with us today. So I think, a lot of people need to stop for a second and remember that as we go through this period of time here in the United States with this green rush attitude, we have to remember that there was a dark rush, a dark attitude about this for quite a long time. And there were a lot of people who paid a price, and you were one of those people who paid that price, my friend. So thank you for doing so for the rest of us.
I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart, and I'm rolling a blunt right now.
Roll a big fatty for me.
Celebrate.
Roll a big fatty for me, my friend. Thank you. And I'll make sure later in the day I blow a little in the air for you.
I appreciate that, my friend, and let's stay in touch.
Absolutely. I do go snowboarding in Whistler from time to time, so if I get up there this year, I'm going to reach out to you. Okay. To make a couple turns for me.
I'll come meet you. I'll meet you at the chair.
We got to make sure we leave no turn unstoned. All right, my friend. You be well, okay? Thank
Thanks,
you.
Montel. You
Yes,
as well.
sir.
Bye for
And
now.
absolutely. For all of you listening, please make sure you go up on Ross's website and get some truth and get some history so you understand how far we've gone and then also know how far we still have to go. It's Montel. Let's be blunt. Thanks a lot for tuning in.